On today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, I'm joined by Philadelphia Eagles beat reporter for NJ.com, Chris Franklin, to dive deep into what's been going on at Eagles camp down at the NovaCare complex over the last 2 weeks. Jalen Hurts shining, surprise cuts, potential keeps for the 53-man roster. How do the new additions look on both sides of the ball? All that and more on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Wednesday edition of the show. As always, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to our everydayers Monday through Friday for making us that first listen. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Really excited about my guest coming on the show today. NJ.com Philadelphia Eagles beat reporter Chris Franklin is going to join me to really dive deep into Eagles camp over 2 weeks. Who's looked great on offense? Who's looked great on defense? Who's struggling? Who could be a surprise cut from this team? Who could come out of nowhere and make the 53-man roster? Updates on the rookie class, Jalen Hurts, all that and more. You've heard Gino and I, of course, recap practices every day from what we're hearing from these beats on Twitter. The updates you're also seeing when it comes to 11-on-11s, red zone drills, all the highlights, right? But I thought, what better way to really get an inside look at what's going on at the NovaCare complex than by bringing on a beat reporter who's on the field every single day. Got to bring in a new perspective. Chris Franklin, some awesome stuff in this interview. Let's get into it now and dive deep into 2023 Eagles camp right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's get into the interview with NJ.com Eagles beat reporter Chris Franklin. All right, everybody, welcome back to a Wednesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Really excited about my next guest. I try having him on every summer to get an inside look at Philadelphia Eagles training camp. He's been nice enough now to do this 3 years in a row. It's the Eagles beat reporter for NJ.com. It's Chris Franklin. Chris, thanks for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it.
Hey, no worries at all. Always great to be back on here with you, Lou, man.
For sure. Yeah, you're one of my favorite guys to have on the show, and I appreciate your insight. And this year is a big year for the Eagles, of course, as they try to run it back and get back to the Super Bowl. A very, I would say, consistent-looking roster compared to last year. Some turnover on both sides of the ball, but overall, a team that looks primed to be atop the NFC yet again. And so, Chris, of course, we'll, a lot of the hype's about the newcomers on both sides, and we'll definitely get into that. But I think we got to talk about the quarterback first with Jalen Hurts. And I think, the first week it was mostly about the rookies. And again, like I said, the newcomers. But this week it's been about, at least from what I've seen down at practices, Jalen Hurts looks just as good as he did in 2022 when he was the MVP runner-up, if not better. Is that what you're seeing with Jalen right now?
He's quietly putting together a really good training camp. I mean, the one thing I've really noticed about his game that he started to show a little bit more consistency with last year was the attacking with the deep ball. And You've seen it through time and time again when he's targeting A.J. Brown deep. He's looking for Devontae Smith deep. He's got the good touch on those passes, and he's giving them those guys enough chances to make those big plays. And when you look at all the elements of this offense and you see all the weapons he has around him, to go to basketball, he's playing the point guard. All he's doing is distribute the ball around this guys. You got the playmakers. And then when all is said and done, if he's got a pass rush in front of him, he's scrambling effectively and picking his spots. And if he doesn't have anything, he's throwing away. So I think that's what you want to see out of the quarterback position. He's doing a great job so far.
Yeah, Chris, I think Jalen's been very good at that the last few years, is picking and choosing his spots. And I don't know. I mean, at least from your perspective, what do you think? Like, if you have great weapons, I think some quarterbacks would see that as, I need to force the issue every single play to make sure I give them a chance to make plays, right? But at the same time, I think you made a good point where it's like with Jalen, he knows the point guard reference is perfect. He knows he doesn't have to do too much because he has these stars in the passing game up front with the offensive line, now in the backfield too. So I think, you're mentioning the aggressiveness down the field, but it sounds like too, it's efficiency and it's the right decisions as well.
Yeah, it definitely is, because and it helps that he's in the same system once again. He's got a familiar voice in Brian Johnson, his former quarterbacks coach, which he's known for so long, being the offensive coordinator, so that helps. I mean, listen, receivers are always going to go, if he's triple team, I was open. Why didn't you throw it that way? Well, you got to save themselves from themselves sometimes. But I like the way he looks comfortable in this offense. He knows the system, and it's definitely helping him take that next level in the game.
Do you think have you noticed anything different about his game? At least, and it's very early into training camp right now, so take it with a grain of salt. But have you noticed anything different in his game or improved from last year? Or is it just kind of consistently what he was doing last year? It just looks like he's doing that again.
I think decisiveness, because even I think at the beginning of last year, there were still some instances where I thought he was holding back a little. He was still trying to read it. Now it's just coming second nature. It looks
Gotcha.
like he knows where, if he sees the safeties going one way, he knows where the open part of the field's going to be. He knows where that route's going to be. Bam, bam, bam. So I look at that as one of the major biggest differences. He looks is comfortable. He's decisive. He knows where the open spots are going to be, and he's taking that to his advantage.
Well, that's exciting too, because and he's mentioned it before. I think it was last year where he called himself a triple threat, right? The running, the passing, and then the mental side. And that's something that I think, Chris, is scary. If Jalen can get to a certain level where the mental part of the game, progressions, you talk about decisiveness, accuracy, if that kind of just becomes muscle memory, an athlete like that, I mean, talk about an ultimate weapon for 2023.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their arcs, and it very much reminds me of Russell Wilson in a way, especially early on, where he looked like Russell was running around for his life, trying to scramble, make the plays, but then he had a decent arm, but you saw little holes here and there.
Right, the first few years, right? You're talking about,
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. You can go Russell last year. But when you look at where they are now, it's similar where it is, and they always say that third year, I don't not count 2020 because that was a whole weird situation with Wentz, but that third year when you're really, it's supposed to be the year that you're supposed to take off and have your biggest jump. And we're starting to see early examples of that jump happening before us right now. And the scary thing is more as he gets, it's going to get better.
That's really exciting. Chris Franklin joining us of NJ.com. Chris, a lot of the offense is pretty much the same. I think there's more turnover on defense, but as you mentioned, new offensive coordinator and Brian Johnson was here last year as the quarterback coach, but a new role. Got a new starting right guard, whether it's Cam Jurgens or Tyler Steen. A new backfield now. Out goes Miles Sanders. In comes DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny. Have you noticed anything different, perhaps schematically or formationally, with the new personnel and the new coaching, or has it kind of been, they're trying to keep things pretty much as consistent as it was last year?
Well, the one thing I've really thought stood out is how much the running backs have been involved in the passing game. I mean, we look at last year, like we look at the spring game, when you look at the flares out to wide receivers, you didn't see that much. It seemed to be always a dump off or a little area to the tight ends or the slants to AJ, Devontae. But this year, you see Swift, you've seen Penny, you've seen Gainwell, all those, and even Boston Scott when he's in there as well. So they're really putting the emphasis on the passing to the running backs, and I think, if anything, that should stretch this. I think that's the next level for this offense to go. Because I think if you get to the stretch, everybody's worried about the wide receivers and tight ends. You have that cornerback, if he's playing his zone, he has to respect those running backs. Because let's face it, Miles Sanders, he was good. He was okay in the passing game. It wasn't his strength. Now you have to worry your corner or linebacker or safety worry about. Well, I got to respect Penny or I got to respect Swift going out there. It's more one-on-one opportunities and just stretches zones a little bit wider as well too.
Yeah, Chris, it sounds like more this year they want to implement it because they have the right personnel, whereas you look back a few years ago in 2021, early on in the season, they were so screen heavy because it feels like they didn't really have a whole lot of other options in the passing game.
Yeah, especially when you look at the receiving core they had and who they had to rely on. Yeah, Rager, it was really young. Yeah, Rager. Yeah, they still had Ward a little bit, and he had a rookie Devontae Smith, and it's like it's night and day now. It's a night and day when it comes to it. But I think that was the element that was really missing. I think between that and consistency in the deep ball, those were two elements I think that were missing in his team, and they're working on to address it. And so far, they're really hammering home those running backs.
Yeah. For sure. Before I ask you some questions about defense, anybody else standing out on offense outside of Jalen? I mean, it sounds like Devontae and AJ status quo, but has there been anybody that's really caught your eye, maybe outside of the big three?
I'd probably say I think Nada. I'm looking at that sixth spot, just in case they run that for it. Joseph Nada, the undrafted free agent out of Clemson. I thought he's done really well. Deion King, before he hurt his ankle, I thought he's showing that and trying to make another push from there as too. Okay. As far as I say, those guys would be, and then Tyree Jackson. Every camp is like that Texas and Tyree Jackson trying to impress in the middle of the camp.
Do you think he has a legitimate chance to make the 53? I mean, I feel like you're right. Every summer, it's like this kid has talent. It's just he can't stay on the football field.
It's going to be tough because when you look at we got Goddard. They really like Stoll his blocking, and you need one of those three tight ends to be that. They really trust Calcaterra too. They like his receiving thing. I think the the winner of this thing, and I think Dan Arnold, you can't forget about him because he's doing all right. The winner of that third tight end thing is going to have to be a good blocker. They're all good receiving options, but they're going to stay out and blocking. And that's not so much his strength, but if he shows that he's done well enough with that, I think he has an outside shot.
Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first betting amount in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you're going to land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who's going to get that first home run, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on the MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, and they're also the official partner of the NFL. You can also bet on NFL futures. Take Jalen Hurts to win MVP. Maybe think Rashad Penny wins comeback player of the year like Brandon Graham should have last year. Sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get up to $200 back in bonus bets. It's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Interesting. Chris, it feels like this team almost has two rookie classes on defense, right? Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis wasn't redshirted last year, but when he came back from injury halfway through the year and they brought in Linval Joseph, the rotation, of course, was different. And, Davis's role was a little different. So, he's coming into year two with a bigger role. As I mentioned, Nakobe Dean, you've got Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter in this year's first round. A lot of those Georgia kids, of the 5 Georgia players you drafted the last 2 years, including Kelly Ringo, has there been anybody that stood out the most so far through camp, or have they all made an impact?
I think the two is this year's crop. When I look at the way Jalen Carter, he did the one-on-one session with against Cam Jurgens, and he was so powerful. The fact that Jurgens had his hand almost around his neck trying to stop him. I mean, Jurgens came back and stopped him the next rep, but the way you see that power, he's shooting a gap. Nolan Smith is. He's been the one that's truly, really impressed me. I look at how quickly he gets around that thing, gets to bend. He's been okay in coverage. That's the one thing I was worried about. If he's stuck in coverage in no man's land, how he does, and he's actually done all right in terms of that. So I think when you look at those two guys, and right now I'd probably give the edge to Smith over Carter right now. But you look at those guys, I think you can see you can see some immediate impacts with them in the rotation early on in the season.
Are they using Davis more in, like 4-man fronts? And how does he look? Again, this is only a week and a half, 2 weeks through training camp, but I think him taking that next step as a pass rusher is very important for him to meet the value of what the Eagles invested in him 2 years ago. What have you seen in that front with Jordan?
I was shocked they were using more 4 than 5. I really thought he was going to be strictly more of a nose tackle, but they've been really using him a lot with Fledge in the 4 end.
Okay.
He still needs to be a little bit more consistent when it comes to his pass rush. I mean, there's reps when you see him getting double teamed that he's doing what he's supposed to do. It's like, all right, it looks good. And then you see him get beat one-on-one because he's using the same move over and over, and they figured it out. So there's still room for improvement in terms of his pass rush ability, but it's they're lucky they got Jalen Carter for that in that aspect.
No, I mean that's a good point. I think Carter coming in and maybe another year with Milton Williams taking a step up puts less pressure on him needing to be that guy. Like Chris, I don't think this is what I said on the show the other day. I don't think for him to be a good NFL player, he needs to become a Dexter Lawrence type of pass rusher. I think the Jordan Davis of the first half of the year last year was a good player, but to meet the value of what the Eagles invested in him to justify that trade up, I think that's where maybe the step is needed.
And I know I'm taking it back with his name and he's definitely his weight might have been that. Ted Washington. He's a guy who was there who you're looking like if he had 2 sacks, like, wow, all right, that's a good season for him. But he was the vacuum in the middle of that defensive line that let everybody else play. So he just needs to be Washington-like in that terms to really just be a force and have all the attention go to him and then let everybody else have one-on-ones.
For sure. Chris, just a few more questions for you. When you go to the second and third level of the defense, pretty thin at linebacker this year. Nakobe Dean is the guy. They bring in Nicholas Morrow to replace one of Kazir White and TJ Edwards, the former Bears starter. Outside of that, though, not a whole lot of depth at linebacker. And are you concerned about the linebacker depth? Is that like if there is a move Howie makes this summer, is it at that spot?
I think it'd be more towards personally, I think it would be more towards just a safety, just in case, like a more of a veteran role that can play in those 3 safety spots. But they're really thin in linebacker too. The one thing that surprised me about that position is you've seen Christian Ellis get a lot of snaps, especially those passing downs as well too. When it comes to good with Morrow, because Morrow's done all right, but you look at it. I know they're all around the same height, weight, and build, but it just seems like Ellis is a little bit bigger. He flows to the ball a little bit better in those run things, those run downs. And when you get some of these more physical teams that you start seeing, especially or maybe towards like November, December,
Yeah.
and try to wear this down because that's the weakness to me. That's the weakness of the Eagles defense. If you're smaller, so you wear down the run game, you control the clock, control the whole entire thing. So it's rare you see like four off the ball linebackers really get rotations. You just need three to play up. And if Ellis plays even somewhat of a decent role, I think they'll look more to address other areas.
Well, and I think part of the way, you can help mask that, Chris, is, more 3 safety looks this year, more defensive back heavy. When you look at the safety group, you mentioned maybe that's the place that Howie Roseman makes a trade or, free agent signing. That's what he did last year, trading for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. This year, I feel like without CGJ, compared to like a calendar year ago, I think they look better on paper before they had CGJ. But like I like their floor better, but the ceiling I think is very dependent on if Sidney Brown can take a step.
Yeah, and I think it's funny you mentioned that the last practice we were watching, there was like a lot more big nickel on it with John Moe. Like, wow, they're really loving using this thing. And you saw Kayvon Wallace working with the one, just like, all right, that's a unique combination there. But
is it more because
it's
Brown's a rookie and that's how they do it? They ease these guys in, or is it really like Wallace looks impressive? And I don't know, because I heard too, Terrell Edmonds wasn't getting sometimes first team reps.
Yeah, I think it's more they want to see what they have with some of these other combinations and mix and match on that one. Yeah, because I mean, Kayvon Wallace to me is more of a special teams player, so I don't foresee that being anything. And I think they want to see more snaps against his first team and see if they basically evaluate and see if he stays on the roster, stuff like that. Sidney Brown, yeah, he's still. It's safety to me is one of the toughest positions, especially coming into the league, because it's just you're not like a corner just going outside and worry about zone man.
Right.
And so I think they're trying to work him in just a little bit, trying to get him more used to that and seeing that. I mean, heck, he was playing the linebacker role in the big nickel. And in the back end too. So they're trying him out, like to see where he's getting comfortable at and where they can bring him in and work him in a little bit more. And I wouldn't be surprised if I don't think he's going to be starting week 1. I would be surprised if they have some packages where they include him just to get his feet wet.
That's good to know. That's good to know. Chris, last thing for you. If you had to give me, and again, this is early on, but if you had to give me like a surprise cut and then somebody that maybe surprisingly makes this roster right now through a few weeks into camp, are there a couple names that come to mind for you?
The one that I don't know if it's a cut or a trade, but I'm really looking at one of either Penny, Rashad Penny, or Trey Sermon, only because of the fact they're so deep at that position. And I look at a team like Indianapolis. Shane Steichen's out there. They got the issue with Jonathan Taylor. Moss is hurt. I could see that being a deal, especially like toward like the last week of the thing. That's player for player. Although Janarius Robinson, I think once Derek Barnett restructured his deal, I think that was more of a sign that he's coming back personally. I think so. That one. So a guy who surprisingly makes it, Mekhi Garner, man. I can see him being a late, like the 53rd man on that roster, just because I look at the way he's been playing, and he's a physical guy. He's been playing really well on the outside, but like Josh Jobe, almost the same type of guy. So I think that's a guy who could be a surprise that makes that out there. Otherwise, it's a lot of chalk. I think a lot of teams around the league are going to start trying to pick apart the Eagles and try to pick it up. It's going to be interesting to see around that time.
And for Eagles fans, that's a good thing. Absolutely. So I think that's definitely a compliment. Chris Franklin of NJ.com joining us today in the Locked On Eagles podcast. Amazing insight, as always, on the Philadelphia Eagles. You can follow him on Twitter at @CFranklinNews. Chris, man, we'll have to do this more than once a year. I really appreciate your time and insight, as always.
Hey, anytime with me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, man.